Good afternoon. So my name is Sultan. I work at Integra Technologies as technical support. And as a lot of you guys know, or at least quite a few have known Integra Technologies. We've been around for 35 years, do a lot of testing, screening, conflict mitigation work. As Henry and other people indicated, I'm a member of the G19A. Actually, I co-chaired that committee for 5 or 6 years. And so with all the products coming in, for all the screening activity that is going on in our company, and with all the committee work that we're involved with, so we do have a perspective from a test house perspective. So that's what I want to share with you. So we have all heard the gloom and the doom, right? Obsolescence is management is impossible. It's costly. I keep hearing the DoD contract does not allow you to go buy material up front before the obsolescence happens. And the technology advancement is happening too quickly. Products are getting obsolete very, very quickly. So it's really, there's no time, as Robin indicated, can we plan on it? Well, by the time we plan on it, that product is obsolete. So what do we do about it? And the counterfeiters, they know our recipe. They know what's going on. So can we even detect counterfeits at all going forward? And purchasing, don't buy from aftermarket guys. The reality is you really have to buy it in many, many cases. The percentages may be lower, but the fact is it's a reality of the situation. But there are a lot of edicts out there that says, nope, we don't want to buy from the brokers. We don't want to buy from non-franchise distributors. And then there's a discussion about, gee, let's redesign. But there are some realities associated with redesigns also. Talked about the brokers. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And can we even validate or effectively validate and test and to authenticate counterfeit devices? And up till recently, there was a lack of comprehensive standards. There are some standards that are being developed. I co-chaired the committee for AS 6171. I'm still not convinced that we have the standard that will protect us in the future. It's a good start. So the facts are, the parts are getting more complex. The facts are that the original component manufacturers are really not, they are obsoleting the parts quickly. But what I see, with the exception maybe of a couple, they are not a part of the solution still. They don't go out and say, gee, here's my reticle, let's go talk to an aftermarket manufacturers, and they can manufacture it given the processes that we had. And as Henry said, the DoD, the aerospace and defense does not really have the clout to influence them to go and make things happen in terms of what is their solution, how can they participate in the solution to help out in extending the life cycle of a product, not necessarily by themselves, but maybe an aftermarket guy. And the counterfeiting problem is not going away anytime soon. A few years back, I thought maybe the newer products, maybe they'll put something on the register that says, if you read this register, you know this is an authentic part. But that's not the only problem that we have. There are other issues associated with used parts and remanufactured parts and the likes of it. So the counterfeiting is not going away anytime soon. And obviously, the complexity is getting bigger and bigger. There's more transistors being put in, and the counterfeiting problem is still growing. So as a test lab, what do we see? So the new counterfeit threats are really more and more non-recognizable. It used to be that I would get a part that I could say, let's just do a black top or do a simple electrical test, and we'll know it's a counterfeit part. There's no dye in it. But those days are gone. The newer threats are absolutely not recognizable. And the type of counterfeits are really, it's no longer blacktopping it, but it's taking, they're so meticulous, they'll take a 100 nanosecond part, they'll take the top side off, and they'll put a 60 nanosecond marking on it, and there's no way on face of Earth you'll be able to tell that it is it really a, it's not a 60 nanosecond part. And there's a lot of other things going on. There's some cases of cloning. Conventional visual techniques are not working anymore. It used to be that I would say 15 years ago, the parts coming to our lab for counterfeit medication, 20, 30, 40% would be able to detect it. Now, we'd be lucky if we find maybe less than 5% of them we can detect it. It doesn't mean that our counterfeiting techniques to detect the counterfeit are really good. It's just that chances are that we're not able to detect it. So non-functional counterfeits, the techniques that we have, the newer counterfeit threats are just making those obsolete. Functional counterfeits, it used to be you could, and I'll show you a couple of slides, that you could do a simple functional test and you would say, yeah, it's really a counterfeit part, because you really don't want to spend a lot of money to develop a functional test program also. Some people still do DC testing. They say, Jill, we'll just do the DC testing. DC testing, this one shows that it only represents 2, 3, 5% of your circuit. So really you're not able to detect counterfeit. You could do AC testing. I can give you a test list of an AC parameters, maybe 3 pages long, but all I have done is taken maybe a small part of the circuit and tested only that part of the circuit. So AC testing is still, unless you're doing it for the entire chip and all the blocks, it's really not telling you a lot. Coming from a test house, I should be saying otherwise, but this is the reality of the situation. If you had a lot of money, you could do every block of let's say, of a processor and test it, and you probably spend a couple $100,000. But when your BOM is like 100 different devices, you don't want to be spending that kind of money. And unfortunately, the manufacturers are not part of the solution. They do have simulation tools, they have data, they have test programs. If they could share with the community, not necessarily not just with the test house, but to the community, I think that would be very helpful. But they don't want to because of the warranty issues and some other issues that they have. And I don't blame them for that. But on the same token, I hear them talk about how we cannot validate a part, but then give us the tools that you have to be able to validate the part. So what are the alternatives? I hear a lot about, let's redesign it. What is the costly solution? PIMs, commercial off the shelf parts, COTS, are increasingly being introduced. But in there are certain applications that, like plastics, you cannot use it without qualifying it. So that also is a costly proposition. And there are other solutions like aftermarket product usage is on the rise, as Henry said, it's a risky proposition. You could use a board interposer solution. And this is what Henry was talking about, that I see repackaged equivalent devices out in the market. Being a reliability engineer for the majority of my life, I think there's, and that's what Henry was also alluding, there is a risk associated with these parts. Cheaply available, but there are risks associated with the parts. So some of the solutions, obviously a board redesign is a solution, but again, it's a costly solution. Non-franchise distributor is absolutely a solution. In many cases, it is the only solution because there's no other parts available. There's no parts that are not being remanufactured. Franchise distributors don't have it. But then there are only a very few good ones left also. There are a lot of, I see lots of parts coming from brokers that some good ones, a lot of bad ones. So, the usage of cost parts, of screening, and the PEMs are getting increasingly part of the solution because you can't find the ceramic devices. Aftermarket equivalent product usage is on the rise. A lot of people are using board interposers, and risky rework process are being used. People are taking die out of a device and putting on another device. That's a very risky process also. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but system redesign is happening, but it requires a lot of planning, a lot of thought process, a lot of money to do that. It's just not, let's just go redesign it, and 3 months, 6 months, a year, we'll have system redesign, because you really have to get it qualified and also synced with the rest of the bigger system. Mil-spec parts are not available, but the commercial equivalent is available. I see a lot more of the people bringing in the COTS parts, say, gee, I need to use this COTS parts for space application or for military application, but it is a COTS part. It was never, a lot of the parts are not screened. They don't have burn-in done on it. In case of capacitors, overload is not tested to the 2x that people want. So it's still a costly proposition in my mind, but it's being done. In the package conversion, I see a lot of people using the package conversion. Plastic devices are being used. Footprint conversions off the shelf is being used. They have to do a lot of work in terms of how that conversion will work. Low reliability risk are to implement the PCB technology, and again, there's some concerns with the package conversions are that really, is it really a package conversion? Is there issues with performance and noise and degradation? So one of the things that I see is the broker market has changed, is changing quite a bit. It used to be that people would go to the broker market and say, let me buy the parts. But then I'm seeing, just like what Converge does and a few other companies do, I see a lot of independent supply chain partners. They're not only buying parts for you, but they're also managing the entire inventory for you. They are taking care of some of the risks associated from where they buy the parts. They're taking care of some of the risks associated of how do they test the parts, who do they use for the testing of the parts. There are people out there that will use one of the shadiest test houses there is, not qualified, never visited them, but they'll give you a certification to say, I have all these certifications. I got a report from a medical company saying, this part has already been tested. My end customer says this is not good enough. Can you look at the report? It's like 100 pages long. All they had was a curve tracer data on it. That's about it. They did not even do an X-ray test on it. So, but then there are purchasing people, unfortunately, that they say, gee, they're supplying us 100 pages worth of data. Must be really good. You know, these guys are really. So what I see from the independent supply chain partners is that they're selecting either they're doing in-house or they're selecting good test houses that does a lot of work for them. And they're deploying some best practices of what are the processes in terms of recognition of return materials or marking or what the supply sources are and the likes of it. So I see quite a bit more and more of this happening. Only a select few are doing that, but whoever is doing that, I feel that, or we see a significant good quality product coming out of them. And the midterm solution is better counterfeit mitigation techniques. It's still coming from a test lab. I think the bar is being raised. There's no longer the case that you go and you test do some simple functionality test, the tampering issues, the cloning issues, is making counterfeit mitigation techniques a little bit harder to do, but still it's available. As Robin indicated, I see the planning for obsolescence is the part, we know that this part is not going to be around for 5 years. I see the newer designs coming in. As a test lab, we do a lot of new product introduction, and the part has not even been introduced, and the part is, the system has not been introduced, but they're using parts that are about to get obsolete. The EOL notice has been issued already, and we are designing them in right now. So I think planning for obsolescence is really key. And long-term aftermarket manufacturing strategy, I don't see OCMs, the original component manufacturers, giving the reticles and test programs to the guys like Rochester's and stuff like that. So, hey, go, keep this in manufacturing for the next 10, 20 years. Some of it is happening, but not all, but not to a larger extent that I'd like to see. And robust supply chain solution consisting of the non-trusted distributors. I think it requires a different breed of non-franchise distributors, and I think, and we're seeing quite some of them are doing that kind of stuff, and some of the older brokers who just want to sell the parts, they're seeing the effect of their limited capability. This is an old chart which says, gee, when possible, buy from a franchise distributor. But the fact is, the franchise distributor may not always have the part. In a lot of cases, they don't have the part. So you have to go down to the totem pole and say, who do I buy it from? And the riskiest, obviously, is to go buy from the remanufactured parts or buy it from a questionable broker. That's all I had.
Questions for Sultan? Right up front.
Yeah. He needs mic.
Excellent briefing, Sultan. Always a pleasure to hear you speak. Even given some of the softness in the coverage you can expect from doing counterfeit detection testing, just set that aside for a moment. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of credentials and expertise do the people who operate these labs, select equipment, evaluate equipment, set up the testing protocols? I mean, you've got a very, very long list of academic and professional credentials for what you do, but in terms of the kind of skill sets that are needed to do this kind of things, kind of sounds like it's not really something that a small organization or even a moderately sized organization would really be capable of doing an effective job at. Could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. What I see is there are a lot of smaller labs popping up with 1 or 2 testers. And there's just no way. So when you get an RF device coming in for counterfeit mitigation testing, that requires a separate breed of testers, or if you have a microcontroller or microprocessor or a memory device that requires a separate set of testers. And at least I know for like Integra, we got 35 different platforms, but that's not the point. The point is, in order to be in today's, because of the obsolescence happening so frequently, you do need sophisticated testers. And you cannot just have a couple of testers and just say, gee, I'll just use those and to do some of the testing. So for example, I've heard that people say, gee, how do it's 100 megahertz parts. My tester can't test it. But what I'll do is I'll do a bench setup. I'll put a 100 megahertz signal up there and see if something comes out of it or not. But that's not how you do it. A true way of doing it would be put a known pattern in it and have a known pattern come out. So, but
Nothing to it.
it is, if you have the right equipment, it is simple.
Okay, we have a question back here. Oh, right over here.
May I ask a question? When you talked about, you have a slide about independent distributors, you mentioned that you do electrical tests. Yes? And I suppose that you mean functional tests. Yes?
Correct.
And so it's not my provocative question. I am not your competitor. But how you are able to do functional tests for all types of semiconductors of different manufacturers?
So it's a very good question. So despite having, we have the largest team of software engineers, like 28. However, I can say that even having a lot of expertise, the level of coverage that I can provide is far, far less than what you think I can. Probably 20%, 30%, 40%. That's the reason I say OCMs, the original component manufacturers, have to step up and say, here's my test program. I don't understand the chip completely as they do. All I can do is I know what an input could be and what an output could be. I could do some of the functionality testing. So for me to say I can absolutely test a part with 80 or 90% confidence, that would not be true. But I'm providing some level of service, but not to the extent that an OCM would be.
Looks like we have another question over here.
So, Sultan, I worked with you guys a lot when I was at BA Systems in Endicott, Johnson City.
Right?
We worked very tightly with you to create the programs and what we wanted covered. Do people, what is your engagement like now? Do people who don't have that expertise, so there's got to be a lot of companies that don't have that deep knowledge, that come to you and say, do whatever it needs to be done to make this part not upscreen it and show me how to prove this is not counterfeit. Do you get that?
All the time, more and more, as more and more the experienced people are retiring. I get that all the time. I don't know how, they'll leave it up to us to tell them what the test plan should be. More and more, the component engineers really don't understand the testing portion of it or the product portion of it. They understand how the flow works and what kind of risks are associated with the application and the likes of it. But when it comes to testing, I see more and more people asking us to be the provider of what should a good test plan be. And that's one of the reasons why these smaller labs are able to get away with some of the work that they do, is because there's just no expertise there, or the expertise is not there that much anymore.
Other questions for Sultan?
I have another one right here.
We got one right here.
There you go.
When performing counterfeit testing, wouldn't it be logistically better for the lab to work directly with the OEM as opposed to the distributor? Where if during the process of counterfeit testing, we're a test lab, so I've been doing it for 40 years. I don't do much counterfeit testing because frankly I refuse to deal with independent distributors.
Yeah, we really can't hear you. You just
Talking.
Okay.
there you go.
So as a test lab, I refuse to deal with independent distributors because it's just I'm not comfortable with. I'd rather deal directly with the OEM itself, where during the process of counterfeit testing, especially during the electrical, where you have DC parametric, AC, functional, and so on and so forth, issues are going to come up. And I would rather deal with the engineers at the OEM who has an invested interest in the product, the end product, as opposed to perhaps, and yes, there are a couple independent distributors that are doing very well, but most of them I really don't trust. And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. So as a policy, if somebody came to me and said, I want to get this counterfeit mitigation done, I'll absolutely ask who the end customer is and who do I contact to find out if this is what the test plan is. There's no way I'll do it just for the sake of, if a broker came in and said, just do it for me. I know we do some testing for converged. We know exactly who the customers are. There's dialogue that goes on with them. But definitely, I would not do business with a broker that says, I can't tell you who my end customer is. I can't because the reputation that they have. And
We as engineers understand that.
we do.
You have to convince management to follow their line.
He said, we as engineers understand that. Now we have to go tell management. Any other questions? Give it up for Sultan. Here we go.